Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about 10 potential big-name players who could be let go this offseason as cap casualties. Joe and I are going to talk about the likelihood of how we think that may happen, and then what are we going to do about them from a dynasty perspective.
Hike!
All right, Joe, so the first player we're going to be talking about is running back Nick Chubb, 28 years old. Right now, the Cleveland Browns are at a negative $20.6 million on his contract. He has 1 year remaining, a cap hit of $15.8 million, and a pre-June 1st cut. If they were to cut him, the Browns would get $11.8 million in cap savings. So, Joe, what's the likelihood that Nick Chubb's on the move? And from a dynasty perspective, are you going to buy, sell, or hold?
Yeah, out of a scale of like 1 to 10 on Nick Chubb here, I might go with like a 7. I think it's pretty likely, for them at this point to move on from him. That's some real savings, $11.8 million in cap savings by doing the pre-June 1st cut. They're negative $20 million cap space at the moment. And then he's got, suffered that bad knee injury last year. Coming off of that, I think that has a lot to do with it as well. They're probably going to look to get younger at the running back position. So I definitely think it's pretend likely. As far as from a dynasty perspective, probably just going to hold him because I don't know if you sell him how much you're going to get for him. Somebody might be willing to, buy low, but it's also a risky investment because you don't know where he's going to go. As I mentioned, coming back off the injury as well. And he's 28 years old. I think you might as well just hold him.
Yeah, I agree. I think at this point, where I would rate him, okay, I would say that he's going to be at a 9. I think that he's going to be on the outs for the Cleveland Browns because he had that severe I would believe it was a knee injury, ACL injury, really gruesome injury. It's going to take him a while to get back. And because of that, that makes me feel like he's going to they can't justify paying that amount of money to a guy who may not even play. Now, the one caveat is, I think Andrew Berry came out and said that they don't want that to be the last play for him, for Chubb, as a Cleveland Brown. They could approach him with a restructure or just to say, hey, renegotiate the terms. Maybe he'd be like, no, forget that. And then they'll have to cut him and maybe they'll bring him back. But I think more than likely he's going to go. As far as the dynasty perspective, that's a tough one for me. I think you got to read your owners. I think I try to sell him. I just think that he's older as it is. Is he going to get another? Unfortunately, that could have been a career ender for him, I think. So for me, he could land somewhere else. I know you're a little bit higher on him than I am, but I think if I could get something for him, I might be willing to do it. So next player we're going to be talking about is wide receiver Keenan Allen. He's 32 years old. The Chargers are over the cap by $44 million. He has 1 year remaining on his deal. His cap hit is a whopping $34.7 million. If they did a pre-June 1st cut, we're looking at $23.1 million cap savings. And they may need it, Joe. So are you thinking that Keenan Allen's going to be cut here? And what would you do with him?
Yeah, Keenan Allen's interesting. According to Jim Harbaugh's going to try to keep him. He's not going to get cut. So I think, it really makes sense for them to move on from him, but I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know if Jim Harbaugh's just trying to come in and say nice and keep the fans on his side. But I think from a business perspective, it makes sense. But is also like, with the way their wide receiver room is currently constructed, they could certainly use them. They don't really have too much there. Quentin Johnson was disappointing. I think another guy they'll move on from is Mike Williams. So I don't know. I would probably put this at maybe a 5 or a 6. Like I think,
okay.
I think they could do it. It makes a ton of sense to do it. But then I feel like also from the player side and their roster, I feel like they almost need to have them on there. I think possibly, he is 32 years old. If I was in Win Now, maybe I would try to buy Keenan Allen just because if I was trying to win now, I think he does have, maybe a year left of decent fantasy output.
Yeah, that's interesting. I am actually going to go with a little bit lower. I think it's going to be probably a 2 or 3 that he gets cut. I'm believing Jim Harbaugh what he says that he's already talked with him and he has intentions on keeping him. I agree financially based on the state of the franchise. I think it could make sense for him not to keep him and to let him go. But I think he's going to stay. So, and you mentioned another teammate of his. We're going to be talking about him shortly. As far as the dynasty standpoint, I think at this point I would be willing to sell him as well. It really depends, right? If you're a win now team, I could see buying him, but I think he's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's going to be 32 years old. And if he's not with the Chargers, then where does he go? That's a big question mark. And even if he stays, we know that Harbaugh likes to run the ball. So he may not even get as many opportunities as he was before. So I think I'd be more likely to sell him at this point. So going to our next player, which you talked about him, his counterpart, wide receiver Mike Williams. Again, the Chargers are at $44 million over the cap. He has 1 year remaining on his deal. His cap hit is a whopping $32.4 million, just a little bit less than Keenan Allen. And if they cut Mike Williams with a pre-June 1st cut, you're looking at $20 million cap savings. So, Joe, how likely is Mike Williams on the way out?
I think this is potentially a 10. I think it's pretty certain that this
so it's
is
like an
gonna be cut.
automatic.
I think this could be automatic. Look, if you're, I know Keenan Allen has dealt with some injuries, but like he's just been super productive. You can't say the same thing about Mike Williams. He just isn't healthy enough. He's just not available enough. And to get the $20 million in cap savings, you're negative 44 over. That's almost half of what they're behind in the cap right there. So I think it's almost certain that they do. And as far as Mike Williams goes, I try to sell him for whatever I can. I don't know what people are going to get, but if you're not going to get a decent enough offer, you could always hold him and see where he ends up going.
I'm with you, Joe. I don't know if it'd be a 10. That's basically an automatic, but I'd at least say an 8 or 9. I think it's very likely Mike Williams is out the door. This is now the umpteenth time that he's ended the year on IR. Guy can't stay healthy. They are really in a bad situation when it comes to their cap. Obviously, as you and I know, they can do restructures and stuff, but more than likely, we're not going to talk about him. We're talking about offensive players here, but they could let Khalil Mack go. They could let Joey Bosa go. They could let some of those other guys go. I'm with you. I think Mike Williams is going to be going. It'll be an interesting name on the market. I'll be curious to see where he goes if that does indeed happen. As far as what I do with him, I'd sell him too. And I would try to sell him for a draft pick. This wide receiver class might be one of the deepest we've seen in a really long time. So if you can get a draft pick and acquire that, whether it's, you can get a guy late, a guy like Malachi Corley. I think he could be a really good player. Some other names as well. You got Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson. These guys are not your, traditional. These are going to be like your Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr.'s. Those are going to be guys you can draft, maybe your second, third rounds in your rookie draft. So I think if you want to trade Mike Williams and get a rookie draft pick, I think it'd be worth it. So going to our next player, a guy who's near and dear to your heart, Joe, wide receiver Deontay Johnson. The Steelers are over the cap by $4.3 million. He has 1 year remaining. His cap hit is $15.8 million, and a pre-June 1st cut for him would allow the Steelers to have a $10 million in cap savings. So, Joe, what do you think is going to happen there for Deontay Johnson?
This is a tough one, Steve. But I think I'd put this one. I'm going to say an 8. I think it is.
Whoa, higher than I thought you'd say.
Yeah, I think it is likely that they will, even though he's had a success. The Steelers don't just prototypically pay wide receivers or really, extend or give a second contract to a lot of their offensive players. They're really good at drafting guys. I know that's something you believe in heavily, as you see, like. They've got George Pickens already, and just their track record to be able to find these wide receivers and draft them and develop them. So I think that and you mentioned this loaded wide receiver draft class. I truly believe they think they could draft somebody, fill the shoes that Deontay is going to leave behind and, get that cap savings. As far as Deontay, I think I'd buy him. I really like the skill set and I like Deontay a lot. It just could be tough as far as what the price could be because I don't know where he's going to end up. But honestly, it's going to be hard for him to go on a worse offense than what this Pittsburgh Steelers offense has done. The only benefit is he's been the true focal point in the wide receiver one, and I don't know if he'll get that same type of treatment on a different team.
I'm not surprised you're saying that at all from a dynasty perspective. I know you're a fanboy of Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, I mean he's he's going to be 28, but I think he's still got at least a few years left of fantasy relevance for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most friendly offense either. I think, you gave out a 10. I'm going to go with a 10. Deontay, I think he's gone. I've heard some news articles say he may get traded. I don't know who's going to give him anything for a trade, maybe a 5th, 6th round pick. You never see veteran players get a lot of, trade capital when they're traded. And, he did some pretty detrimental things as far as detrimental contract to the team. Just the way that his behavior was. I mean, Pickens is in itself a bad situation.
Okay,
but
I'm glad you addressed that.
Well, I mean, Pickens is worse, but Deontay Johnson isn't any better either. So to me, I think they need to I think that he doesn't fit the Steeler way. I think he's gone. He have a huge amount of cap savings. And they could also, we're not going to talk about him because he's not as relevant. He's not a big name, but Allen Robinson, too, I think they can get like $10 million in cap savings, too. He's going to be on the way out, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah, I think they want to try to get a guy like Calvin Austin more involved. Honestly, he could fill into that Deontay short slant route as well. And then, draft somebody to be outside there, number 2. And I agree. Probably Allen Robinson's probably as good as gone.
And I definitely would sell him to somebody like you who would be interested in him because
it's all right, baby. I'll take him, Steve.
I know you will because I don't want anything to do with him. And, depending on where he goes, it could be better for him. Just not a big believer in the player. So I would go ahead and sell him. So going to our next player, we got wide receiver Tyler Lockett. The Seahawks are negative $1.5 million in cap space. He got 2 years remaining, so this one's a little bit trickier, Joe. His cap hit is $27.8 million, and a post-June 1st cut would mean a $17.9 million in cap savings. The dead would be $9.8 million this year, and then $9.8 million in 2025. So what do you think happens with Tyler Lockett?
Yeah, I feel like this is a tough situation. I don't know. Obviously you got the new coaching staff in here. I don't know if that really is going to change anything. But I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle. So I'll go maybe a 4. I don't know if it's that likely. I think that it definitely makes sense. It's another one where it makes sense. And then I wonder how much do they want to clear the pathway for JSN to take over? And they definitely could do that. It's just, do they want to, it's a decent amount of savings, but it's also, a decent amount of, cap hits that they're going to have. I know it can get divided over the next couple of years, but if you just keep them and to get rid of them next year, it's a little bit better of a cap scenario there. As far as from a dynasty perspective on Tyler Lockett, I'm probably looking to sell him. I mean, he's 31. Last year I feel like it almost saw kind of a start of a decline in my eyes. So I would try to sell him. Not really sure what kind of return you can get for him. And we'll see what kind of team that he goes to. Maybe that increases his stock if somebody is excited about his landing spot.
I would say for me, I think it's a 4 that he gets cut. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's likely that he does. I think it'd be more apt he gets traded. I don't think the Seahawks are in that, unless there's rumors that Jamal Adams will get cut. His contract is not as friendly. So if they feel like they need to maybe cancel it out, maybe they would cut both. Tyler Lockett definitely took a step back. The reason why they would is so that Jackson Smith-Njigba can take that next step to be the guy, and he showed flashes of that. So I could totally see them doing that. So I don't know. That one's a tough one for me.
Yeah,
I think it does make some sense, but I don't think they're in a dire situation that they have to do it.
I think part of it is I just don't know where they're going. Like I still feel like they're somewhat competing, so it's not like they're ready to kind of rebuild and let their young stud and Jason play. They still got Geno at quarterback. Not sure if they're going to address that for a guy of the future. But I think that's what's also tough because I think they're kind of going for it, which means if they are, then they'd probably hang on to him.
Yeah, I agree. And as far as a dynasty perspective, I'm with you. I'm selling this guy for whatever I can get. Again, same logic. This is a great rookie draft class for wide receivers, probably the best that we've seen in years, maybe decades. So if you can get a rookie draft pick in exchange for, a guy like Tyler Lockett, I'm doing it in a heartbeat. If you could even get, a second rounder would be great. I don't think you could get it. Probably a third rounder is probably more likely, and maybe a developmental wide receiver at best that you can include in it. But, if you're a win now team, I guess you can go for him. But, like you said, did we see him take a step back? I think for Lockett, he'd almost be better off to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. I think a different a change of scenery could be good for him.
So next player we got, Joe, is wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins with the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Titans are not hurting for cap space, Joe. They actually have $73.9 million in cap space available. So this is not a cap-related decision. Now, he's got 1 year remaining. His cap hit is $17.9 million. But if they were to cut him, they could get an additional $10.1 million in cap savings. Joe, how likely is DeAndre Hopkins on the move?
Yeah, to me, this is a tough one. Just because, like you said, they don't really need to for cap scenario. They really don't have that many guys in the wide receiver room. Do they want the wily vet to kind of stick around and help a young quarterback like Will Levis out? So I'm going to go maybe. I don't think it's that likely. So I'd say maybe a 2 or a 3 here, just because they're not in that cap scenario. And I think maybe they would try to trade him and before they go ahead and give him the cuts. And as far as what I do for him in Dynasty, I'm definitely not buying him. I guess I would try to sell him, and then hopefully he made enough tantalizing plays down the field last year that would provide some value.
And he did pretty good with Will Levis at times. So, he could be better than you think.
Yeah, Will Levis, there was times, even if he was triple covered, he was just hacking him and check down DeAndre's down there somewhere and give him a chance to make a play on the ball. So that's what I mean. And that's why I think another reason they might keep him around is just because to provide Will Levis a little more confidence and keep a guy like that around, a veteran.
So I'm going to go with a 6. And that's just pure speculation because I think Mike Vrabel was trying to get this team to be a win now team and really compete. I think I have no inside source on this. I just believe that we know now that the rapport with him and Rand Cartham was not good, which led to his exit. And I think that DeAndre Hopkins went in there to, try to say, hey, I can get this to be a winner. I don't think that was a Rand Cartham move, and I think this team is in real rebuilding mode and in development mode. So I think they'd rather give snaps to guys like Treylon Burks, Kyle Phillips. I think they could try to, if T. Higgins is available, I think they could try to go get him, with Brian Callen coming from the Bengals. So I just feel like they have different plans for that team. Just don't think Hopkins fits in their plan. I just don't think they'll be able to trade him. Cardinals tried to do it. His contract was worse off. Just don't know if anyone want to trade for him, to be honest with you. And then as far as what I do with him, same logic as I said before. I would try to sell him, try to get some rookie draft picks.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the reason the Cardinals really couldn't trade him was the cap situation. He's better here, and honestly, Titans could eat some of the cap. They got so much room; they could eat some cap to get a deal done. But
that's true.
We'll see what happens.
So next player we got is tight end Darren Waller on the New York Giants. The Giants do have some cap space. They have $26 million available. Darren Waller has 3 years remaining on his contract with a cap hit of $14 million. If they did a post-June 1st cut, they would get a $12.1 million in savings with a dead money of $1.9, and then 2025 they would have $5.9 million in dead money. So not that much, but Waller was disappointing. So the Giants just decided to move on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I could see it happening. I don't know how likely it is. I'll go with a 2 here. I don't think it's that likely. Just last year they were willing to give him this deal. He's got 3 years left. It'd be tough for me. There wasn't a regime change either, so it'd be tough for me to see them, believe in the guy last year, give him that contract. And I know he was disappointing, but I think there's enough hope for them that maybe he can try to stay healthy this year. And they really don't have many replacement options for him. If they were against the cap, I'd feel differently, but since they're not, I think they end up holding on to him and see if he can improve this year. From a dynasty perspective, how I feel about Waller. I'm not that big out of him for fantasy. I don't think you can rely on him staying healthy. So I would definitely try to sell him and see if you can't get something for him.
Interesting. Yeah, I think for me, I agree with you. I think it's around a 2. I don't think that he's going to be cut. More than likely, Saquon Barkley might not be on this team. I mean, this offense could look a lot different. They gave him that. He has 3 years remaining on the contract, and they didn't have Daniel Jones for most of the year. So maybe what they envisioned the offense to be just wasn't really there for them to see it. So I don't feel that unless there really is just a divide between them and they feel like they'd just be better to move, kind of part ways. I don't see it happening that they're going to cut him. So I'm with you. As far as a dynasty perspective, I would buy him because I think that there's not a lot of options on that Giants offense, and especially if Barkley goes, Barkley has been the part of he's been the motor for that offense for so long. So I kind of like the upside. Waller, he's only 32. And the reality is you probably could get him for not all that much, I would think, because he was pretty disappointing. So I feel like you could get him for a fair price.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely get him on the cheap. It's just I just don't know what you're going to get out of him because, I mean, you can bank on him getting hurt at some point, not playing a full season. But to your point, you're not paying that high of a price, so you probably wouldn't be concerned about that, and obviously would have to have a contingency plan if you did that.
So the next player we're going to be talking about is running back Alvin Kamara. The Saints, Joe, as we know, Saints they like to deal with the cap space and be in a huge amount of debt. They are over the cap by a whopping $81.8 million. I mean, that's just huge. Now, Kamara's got 2 years remaining. His cap hit is $18.8 million. If they were to do a post-June 1st cut, they would get $11.8 million in savings, a debt of $7 million this year, and then in 2025, a $10.1 million debt. So they're going to have some debt, but if they were to cut them, they do get that $11.8 million in savings. So, Joe, what do you think happens with Kamara?
Yeah, I'm going to go with I think I'm going to go with a 9 on this one. I'm pretty certain they're going to move on from him.
Wow. Okay.
They need the cap savings. They've got Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams on the team here. I think it's time to see what you got in Kendre Miller. He had the injury concerns last year, but hopefully he's healthy and can prove, as their contingency plan and prove where they drafted him and really show out. And I think he's got the talent and really could do a lot for that Saints backfield. For Kamara, I would honestly, I'd be buying him from a dynasty perspective. If I'm looking to win now, I know he's around that age 30 and running backs that get scary. But I think he could help you maybe for at least a couple of years here. I think I saw enough out of him. It doesn't look like, a couple of years ago, I thought he lost a step possibly, but then seeing him this year, I felt like he's still got some quickness left. I think he's got something left to him. The only thing is, where does he go and, how will he get utilized? That's the one question.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to go with a 7. I'm not as high as you, just because the Saints are just prone to, they love their void years and they love to restructure, just, kick the can down the road. We'll deal with it later. Eventually the buck will stop. And maybe that's the case, but they could easily restructure him, restructure Carr, restructure, a bunch of other players. So they could just keep that method over and over again. I could also see them cut him because they need it. So, and you said they drafted Kendre Miller, they've got Jamal Williams, so it could make some sense. I'm with you. I'm buying him too because he's age 29. So a lot of, Dynasty, it's like, it's an aging running back. We can't have him, but he's a different type of running back. He's a dual threat guy. He's very good in the receiving game. So I still think he's going to have value. And so, if I hope he would get cut sooner rather than later, though, because if the market dries up and then he comes on, it could be hard for him to find a job. Yeah,
that is very true. But running backs is such a tough position. I think teams realize they need depth there. Running backs get hurt all the time. So I think even if, maybe teams head into training camp with their full spots at some point before the season, he'd get added.
All right, Joe, next player we're going to be talking about is running back Joe Mixon. Another one of your, you're a fan of this guy, Joe. Bengals do have cap space. They have $61.3 million in cap space, so they're not hurting. He has 1 year remaining with a cap hit of $8.8 million. If they were to do a pre-June 1st cut on him, they would get $6.1 million in savings. So what do you think happens with Joe Mixon?
Yeah, it's interesting. Me personally, like, I don't see why they would, but then I'm also seeing the reports saying that they're possibly going to move on from him. Uh, so, I'm going to go with a 4. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's where I got to gauge it because I don't really think it makes that much sense. If you got the cap space, you got 61, they only get 6.1 in savings. I do understand that they're trying to pay their young guys too and keep a guy like T. Higgins around. So maybe that plays into it. But, we've seen some stuff out of Chase Brown. Joe Mixon is still good. He's gotten into the end zone. He can catch passes too. And I'm not so sure that like Chase Brown's just ready to own the backfield. So at cheap as the cost as Mixon is to have on your team, why not just keep him on here and then continue to let Chase Brown develop? And I know you're going to disagree, Steve. Me personally, I'd be buying Joe Mixon.
That's nuts.
I don't see anything wrong with that. I think he's still got. I think he's going to get picked up. I know you're saying if the Bengals release him, he's not even going to have a job. I completely disagree with that. Some team will have him. I think he's still got a couple of years left, and at the very least, if teams utilize him on the goal line, he's got the touchdown upside. And we even saw a guy like Ezekiel have some success with the Patriots.
I'm going to go with a 7 for Mixon. I think that I do believe the rumors that they may cut him, and they've been talking about that for a long time. The thing that holds me back is they don't need to from a cap perspective. They could keep him, and they have plenty of money. I think that they may just want to use that money for those young players, and there's this running back free agency class is just really, really good, and they may just elect to go younger or just go a different direction. So I think they're going to do that. I would sell him as much. He's of all these guys, he'd be the one I'd be selling the most. If I get anything for him, I don't think he's going to have a job in the future. So I would be glad to take anything from him.
I think you could get the most from him. I mean, he's coming off of a pretty good year. So I think of the guys that we have on this list, I mean, you could probably get the biggest return for him.
Well, I hope so. I don't own any of them, but I'd like to.
Maybe outside of Deontay, depending on how other people feel, just because he's he's at the wide receiver position.
So, Joe, I saved the best for last for number 10 here. Are the Denver Broncos going to be moving off of quarterback Russell Wilson? The Broncos are over the cap by $25.9 million. He has 5 years remaining. His cap hit is $35.4 million. If they did a post-June 1st cut, they would save $0 million. So there's no savings there. The dead would be $35.4 million, and then the 2025 dead would be a whopping $49.6 million, which I think could be a record. So Broncos would not be saving any money with this move, but obviously it's not pretty over in Denver right now between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. So what do you think happens?
Yeah, for number 10, I'm going to put this at a 10.
Oh, boy.
I think he's as good as gone. You see him and Sierra are already putting up their $25 million mansion in Denver up for sale. They got tours. They're looking to sell it. I think he knows it's pretty much inevitable at this point that he's going to be gone. There's just, in my eyes, there's just no returning from repairing his and Sean's relationship. I mean, you saw Sean screaming at him on the sideline to benching him for the last 2 games. And then saying that it strictly had nothing to do with his injury clause and it had everything to do with thinking Stidham could play better. I mean, if you think Stidham can play better than the guy you're giving almost $40 million to, that's saying a lot. So I think he's good as gone. And as far as, Dynasty goes, boy, I would try to sell him for, somebody that believes in him. He had a halfway decent year with the Broncos. I just don't know how likely it is for him to get a starting job for whatever team picks him up. So that's why I would sell him versus buying him.
I'm going to agree with you, Joe. I think it's a 10 out of 10. I think he's gone. I think the writing's on the wall. Like you said, he's selling his house. Sean Payton and him, I think they can't. I don't know. I don't think they can salvage a relationship. I just don't think they can. I think it's over. So I think he's gone. It's not a cap savings for the Broncos, but they're just going to take it to the chin and just move on. As far as his dynasty value, I think I'd hold him. I think he could be, he's been a good QB2, lately. He's a good backup guy. I think he does get a starting job. So he's a guy, he's not going to be your QB1 ideally in a dynasty league. But I would definitely hold him in a super flex league. I think I probably would buy him because I think his name has been pretty tarnished in Denver. So I think there'd be some value there.
Yeah, his name's been tarnished, but I mean, Sean Payton did kind of get a way better season out of him. I mean, he had, I think it was 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, so he was pretty good in terms of that stat. And Sean Payton seemed to do well, but I don't know. You're confident he gets a starting job elsewhere.
I do, yeah.
Interesting, because that's the one part that's iffy for me. I don't know.
There's too many bad quarterback spots. He's just based on his pedigree. I think teams would be willing to kick the tires again. Is this just the new Russ, or can they kind of unlock what he was back in Seattle?
Yeah, well, from what I know, they better have a lot of communication, because that was always something that was a problem in Denver, and I don't think they've realized, hearing past players talk from Seattle, communication from the sideline and guys bringing in plays from the sideline was a huge thing, and that's not a responsibility, I guess, Russ is usually having on his own.
So that does it for our 10 potential NFL cap casualties. We talked about some big names today, Joe. So we're going to see if any of these come to fruition this offseason. It'll be very exciting. The NFL league year is going to be coming up in less than a month. So I know you and I are both looking forward to it. Hopefully you found this video helpful. You can start kind of, thinking and strategizing about what you're going to do with these players in your Dynasty leagues. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.